Welcome back to Cheche. Today's guests are Dr. Mshai Mwangola, Chair of the Uraia Board of Trustees, and Irungu Houghton, Associate Director of the Kenya Dialogues Project of the Society for International Development. They are giving us their reflections on the state of Kenya. Before the break, Mutegi, before I go into our viewers, you were talking about getting to the core. Waweru. My apologies. You're sitting in the wrong place. You know that. Waweru, you're getting to the core. Yeah. Yes, please go ahead.
I want to act as the devil's advocate. We must also challenge Wanjiku and ask her, what is the source of your frustration? You know, when Mutegi says that there was voter registration up there, why are we going through this? It's because the same Wanjiku made a mistake. Yeah? By not making decisions or making a decision based on am I picking on the right person. And I'm not saying the choice of the president and the deputy president is wrong. The same thing applies to the other side.
I'm serious.
Yeah. But the problem is Wanjiku goes and elects Mutegi, yeah, based on ethnicity, based on the money that Wanjiku got. Yeah. Then after the elections, Wanjiku does not get anything from Mutegi, yeah, and Mutegi knows I bribed her. Mutegi knows that she elected me based on ethnicity, and I'm going to use the same when it comes to the elections. We must tell Wanjiku, and time has come. Wanjiku, the problem is you, and not the leadership, because you have that arsenal, which is the vote that you are supposed to use to pick the right person. It's not only about the presidency. It's beginning from the MCA. And all the other posts. Wanjiku has frustrated herself by making a mistake every 5 years and every other time when we have a by-election, because Wanjiku has never been a Kenyan. She has always been that woman from this village and from the other village. There is also a misconception, and I really want to agree with Dr. Mwangola, but also differ a bit when we say that some people in this country, it is true that some regions like Turkana, Wajir and the rest, probably they have been forgotten. But the thing is, we are talking about class in Kenya. In Kenya we don't have tribes. We have the haves and the have-nots. It is about, and the biggest war we can fight in this country is about class. People who think they are rich and pretenders. The middle class Mutegi who drive cars that they don't own. They drive cars owned by banks. You are driving a car. If you stopped vehicles on Thika Road or Mombasa Road and tell them, hold your logbook, they don't have them because they are owned by banks. And they pretend and behave like they are so rich. We must come and agree that we are all having the same problem.
Okay, in terms of problems, this is what our viewers are saying about their state of Kenya. The state of the nation is corruption. We are still tribal. Uhuru should stop appointing his classmates. And that's from Faith. Kenyans have been patient enough on the war on corruption. We want to see real prosecutions and not just PR exercises that have no real results. Kiboy in Kitale. The state of the nation addresses have now become opportunities for the president to cover up his government's failures with PR statements and perhaps take tea with his friends at parliament. Nothing changes here at the grassroots. Ken in Kimal. When a nursery school child says, I'm Kikuyu, I don't like Luos, the person saying that we be patient has lost direction and he's annoying Kenyans. The state of Kenya, more tribalism, where top appointments are from 2 communities. Watchmen, drivers, tea girls from 40 other tribes. Corruption, government staff simply vomiting on president's shoes and no one gets jailed. Security, talk, little to show for it. Hosea, Nairobi. And I could read many more, and they all echo this sense of despair that you've just heard. And so, Waweru, you were the one who talked about hope. You were the one who talked about patience. What would you say to these people?
They must make the right decision when the time comes. They will talk like that for now, but wait until elections are called. The voter up there that you are talking about, Mutegi, it will be won when they will be told, do you know why? You know what? We are going to lose our seat. That is the presidency or whatever seat, because these guys have the numbers now, and they will troop and go and vote and register as voters.
But because I think I agree with you to the extent that actually I guess the solution is when Kenyans get angry and focused enough to say on these issues that matter to us, we are now being 100% responsible.
Exactly.
The concern, I think, the source is really a profound disappointment with the leadership that is out there. But I think I agree with you that actually the way to break through that is to generate, I think as Uraya and all the organizations out there in the society are consistently looking for ways of improving the level of public participation. 73%, 2 out of 3 Kenyans actually believe that they cannot influence their government with the constitution that we currently have, with all that is embedded there about public participation and all the commitments that our governments have made. And I think the thing for me is actually how do we find ways of not leaving people feeling great, but actually leave people being great, so that when the president speaks tomorrow, the language that I would be looking for is a language that says go and take action in all the areas that are important to you, and gives license to the country to take the issues back and actually take action in a way in which it leaves the country transformed. And therefore, we are not simply waiting for leaders to do things on our behalf.
But
I think if that language is there, it will be very powerful.
Yeah, but think about it, Irungu. The president has touched on that sort of thinking before. Remember security, and he said security starts with you and me. Government can't do everything, and the response, those such what's the word I'm looking for? Vitriolic response to that, saying that he had abdicated his responsibility as a leader. So it's almost as if the president and the government are caught in this, catch-22 situation. Whichever way they go, they're damned.
So that was 2014. He called for greater security mechanisms, and the Nyumba Kumi initiative was announced. Right?
No, now, even as far back as recently as last year, he said
it's been a consistent thing. What I've not seen is actually the structures that are empowered and resourced to do that. Look at Nyumba Kumi. There has been very little work that has maintained that principle that the community should be responsible for its own security up to a certain point. I mean, I think it's not that there should be militias that are emerging in every ward, but I think the point was simply that we actually are responsible for ensuring that the security enforcement agents are supported with information, with a working relationship, and that essentially didn't happen. I mean, the Nyumba Kumi initiative was not resourced. We know this. It was not given the resources that are required to actually go out across the 47 counties and support them. The counties have been calling for county-level security. That has never been resolved. So I think there is one thing about saying that we want to empower people, and there's another thing about taking the actions very consistently to make sure that people do have the mechanisms and the resources to be able to do that. And I think that's what's missing.
I think also, I mean, and for me, going back to the president's promise was to defend, protect, and respect the Constitution. I think the most effective way that we can get Wanjiku to begin to live up to her responsibilities is that every public servant must demonstrate in their actions that they are defending, protecting, and respecting the Constitution, to the point that when a public servant sees, and I'm going to take the example of the IEBC. Now, I do not know what happened with Chicken Gate. I do not know that the officials there have done anything that is not right. However, I do know that there is no confidence in the IEBC today. How do you defend, respect, and protect the Constitution? I would like to see the president challenge the IEBC to say, look, we have a problem. We are stepping down to protect the integrity of that institution. I would like to see the president say, yes, if certain constitutional appointments are coming up, Kenya National Human Rights Commission, judges in the judiciary, that the president is doing everything he can to show that he respects the Constitution. And I would like to see in the State of the Nation address a section where the president says, here is what happened in the last year in terms of the Constitution. This is what my government has done to do that. I also want to address the question of security, because security is part of our Constitution. I think the problem is our focus is on the security of the state. And what people would also want us to see is us also focusing on human security, so that for a woman who's living in Kibera, frankly, she's going to be more worried about getting raped at night, when she's going home at 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. than about a bomb going off anywhere around her. And I think until we start to address those issues, what does security mean? And I'm going to go back to Turkana and West Pokot, because that's where I'm doing my research right now. More people are dying of the low-intensity violence that those of us in Nairobi call rustling and banditry. And we see 20 people killed in an attack, and we say, oh, that's a Turkana, or that's a Pokot, and we move on with our lives. then are dying. I would challenge anybody to disprove. We lost more people, more Kenyans to that kind of low-intensity violence than we lost to terrorism. Now, terrorism, I'm not saying that we shouldn't look at that. That's something that we as Kenyans are agonized about, and we should be. But until we're paying attention to both, I think Wanjiku is going to say that this government and this country is not being fair to us. And I think that is where, for me, the question of security, Nyumba Kumi should not just be about telling somebody if a terrorist has come to move next door. It should be about the small things that we do to make sure that every human being, the child in Malindi, whom somebody said the other day, that this girl enjoyed sex. So therefore, we as a nation are not going to rise up and protect her rights as a child who did not know what she was doing, whatever she pretended to be. Until we are as concerned about that as we are concerned about the possibility of a bomb going off in Nairobi, I don't think we're living up to our constitutional imperatives. And that is where I think our problem is.
Wanjiku must refuse to be used. And we must give practical examples. If you look at today's nation, there is a photograph, I think on page 3, a photo on page 3 or page 4 of the nation, where one of the governors who appeared at the EACC is going back home and is being received by Wanjiku. You know this Wanjiku that we have been talking about? We have never identified who is Wanjiku. And there is this photo of a lady wearing a t-shirt, yeah, defending the governor. You know, who made this t-shirt? For what purpose? Why is that photograph in that newspaper and given a lot of space? You know, we are talking of a society that has given itself to the corrupt, to the suspects, to people who do not have integrity. And I'm sorry to say that because it is actually in the newspaper and nobody is going to analyze that. The photographer who took that photo, what did he or she want to achieve? What did this governor want to achieve by having an old lady wearing a t-shirt that that was bought purposely for that? And all that. You must look at these things. Why does this person also want to be used that way?
Okay, sorry, Mutegi.
To me, the crucial matter about all that is what he referred to, civil society. We came out of 2A because of civil society. We were able to remove monolithic politics because of civil society. We thought the Kibaki government, the young people, the young president, and they will support civil society development in this country. In fact, there was a time when donors were not given to the government, they were given to civil society. But what I'm seeing now is the regime that is current, they are not encouraging the growth and development of civil society. They want to interfere. They wanted to interfere with the elections of our society. They wanted to curtail the donor funding to 15%. They want to muzzle the press. So I'm going to, when you tell Wanjiku to do something, through what means? That's what I'm asking. Through how? How do you educate Wanjiku, that woman wearing that t-shirt? Remove it. That when when the governor stole and he is in court, it is not. Did he give you the money except the t-shirt and maybe the transport to come to demonstrate? How do you strengthen civil society? Because that's the solution, I see.
I mean, Wanjiku is capable of exerting power and influence and has done it many times. We know statistically 60% of the National Assembly will not return. I suspect that will be reflected in the governors as well. Right? So Wanjiku has the capacity to make the changes that she needs to do. The thing that I think is missing is this ongoing work that is needed between the electoral periods and the identification of the issues and actually victory on those issues. So we have many things, and I can give you all kinds of conversations that are happening in urban Nairobi now about modern kiosks, or about noise pollution, or about protection and safety and freedom from harassment of young youth in some of the people settlements across the different wards in Nairobi. So there are things that are happening. But I think the thing that I wanted to raise, which I think it's really important, is that the leadership has to do two things. One is recognize that their greatness stems from their ability to take criticism without holding resentment. So I am sure, as people are writing the speech for the president and are coaching him and supporting him to make the speech that we want him to make tomorrow, there are people who are saying, don't worry about the critics. Ignore the critics. They have nothing to offer. And I would say again that greatness comes from being able to take constructive criticism without resentment. The second thing is not interfering with what I call, I don't call it so much civil society, but really societal life. The right of us to choose the associations we wish to be part of, to elect our leaders, to be able to experience the democratic. Our own work within the Society of International Development has demonstrated that actually very few Kenyans are involved in institutions or associations that are acting in the public interest. Until that transforms, then we will not produce the leadership in our local environment that will generate a national leadership that is consistent or a mirror of the Chapter 6 clause. So I think that society is very much an incubation or a laboratory for leadership. And the more that you interfere with that, whether it is interfering with the elections of NGOs or the law society or the media, the more you cripple this country's capacity to produce leadership that is better than we have now.
Okay, and our director tells me that he's got a picture of the woman we were referring to, and wearing the T-shirt emblazoned with a politician's picture. Yes,
Yeah,
there we go.
There it is.
Right. Okay, and so for many people, would this be Wanjiku?
I think many people would see her as Wanjiku, but I think it's also important to remember that we are Wanjiku. And so every time I hear you blaming Wanjiku, I'm saying, but you're blaming yourself.
Exactly.
And for me, one of the things at Uraia, I mean, like you said, we sit on the board. One of the things we always remind ourselves is that we sit on the board as Wanjiku. We are holding people to accountability. You may notice that I have not talked about our leaders. I think we need to emphasize that these are public servants. They are servants. They're there to serve us. They're there, we need to hold them to accountability. For me, one of the things I would love to see the president do, and I'm sure he's going to do this tomorrow, is to say to us, I made you certain promises last year. This is, I'm going to now account for it. There's certain things I said, Lamu to Lokicha would be done by the end of this year. I want him to give, to say, okay, I'm now reporting back to you. He said that he was going to see the TJRC policy through Parliament. He said, I'm going to make sure Anglo-leasing case is taken care of. I'm going to make sure. I think it is time that we hold him to accountability, but not just from Wanjiko's side. I think we need to get leaders to starting to say, that governor, starting to say that rather than that woman coming dancing up to me, I should be the one dancing up to her. So let's address the issue of why she's doing it. It's because she feels the nation has failed her. The only person whom she can go to see anything done is that governor. That governor is the person who's then going to tell her, be careful about those other people who become the big ogre that she now fears, because she feels the governor has actually convinced her that if that person comes into power, you're going to be finished. And we hear people saying it. And I agree with Irungu totally that that question of saying it's not just about voting every 5 years. It is about, can we enable, and in the sense of making Wanjiku actually believe that our leaders want to be held accountable. And it's got to start with the president. The president saying, I am sorry, the National Assembly failed you. They had 5 years to enact certain legislation. They did not do it. And I am going to make sure that A, B, C, D is done. I am sorry that the NICC has failed you because we are less cohesive than we ever were before. Why exactly are we giving them more money for their salaries? And I think until we start to do that, then Wanjiku actually feels comfortable in saying, it's not about leadership where I follow and I dance. It's about them accounting to me. And then Wanjiku feels I am powerful enough. Let's remember Article 1. The sovereignty is with the people. It's not with the executive. It is not with the state. It is with the people. Wanjiku doesn't believe it because nothing about our systems tell her that that is true.
Okay, coming back to civil society, Irungu, and Mutegi, you raised this question. There's a perception, though, that there's a lot of knee-jerk negativity that comes from civil society, which allows it to raise funds from foreign donors, so that you're not necessarily acting in the interests of Kenya, Wanjiku, the public, that it is in your interest to blow up disproportionately, the challenges that countries like Kenya face.
So I would respond to that by saying, over 1,000 people died during the post-election violence, 100,000 people were displaced. Was that really a pretext for funding? Alex Madaga spent 18 hours in an ambulance waiting for his constitutionally enshrined right to emergency care. Non-governmental organizations took on that case, and actually yesterday the health bill went through Parliament with a re-enshrining of the right to emergency care. Was that again an opportunity to raise funds? I was arrested at Langata Road Primary School. It's been a long time since I've been arrested. Was I really doing that in order to get funding from the donors? We now have the possibility of 7,500 applications for title deeds. We have 2,400, and to be honest, in the next 2 days, the promises of the Cabinet Secretary for Lands, the chairperson of the National Land Commission, that we would have title deeds beginning to, or lease certificates given to schools to protect them against land grabbers. Are all of this really some conspiracy to get funding from donors? No. I think much of the work that we do is really in the public interest. And I'm increasingly getting to a point now where I now make the distinction between public service and those of us acting in public interest. And the second group doesn't have to be in government. The second group can be outside of the state but acting in public interest. Too many of us who want to go into public service see the public service as an opportunity to get benefits, rather than recognizing that actually being in public service, acting in the public interest, is the only benefit. The rest is just remuneration and some perks. But actually the most important thing there is really the opportunity to act in the public interest. So I would probably challenge that outright, not to say that there aren't some NGOs who basically are walking briefcases. I think we need to challenge them also to actually raise their game so that they are responding to a public interest. We have an opportunity now with a new Cabinet Secretary. We have a newly appointed NGO Coordination Board chairperson. Our concern has really been that in many ways the appointment of the chairperson, Brigadier Ali, who has maybe a reputation as a reformer in the police force, but also a former indictee of the ICC, a military man, that in many ways that wouldn't have been the obvious choice to make in order to restore the relationships between civil society and the state. But I still am optimistic that a conversation can happen that is in the interest of the country.
I would like to support you by saying this. Woodwork and I belong to Rotary Club.
Right.
Rotary Club is not a place where you gain anything.
Right.
In any case,
you don't write proposals.
Always. No, you don't write no proposals.
About self.
We serve the people.
Right.
We don't get anything. In fact, even anything we pay.
Right.
For the privilege of serving.
Everything.
Right.
You talk nothing at all. So you can't say that NGOs are what they do. Maybe you have briefcase NGOs like maybe in places like AIDS. Energy education. The ones that do seminars all over the place, in fictitious seminars, in fictitious hotels. Those may be there, but that's not the main thing. I'm concerned about the retrogressive measures I'm seeing from Parliament, changing rules so that when reporters go to report there, they become difficult.
Right.
That we have to ask the Speaker or the clerk of the Assembly, or for an NGO to establish a view. That kind of restrictions that are coming from young people, I'm very ashamed of them. Because they are digital. Digital does not mean restriction and restrictiveness. That's what I'm concerned about.
But particularly, you remind me a little bit of a story, and if I can just digress. I was working about 5 years ago, and I was driving somewhere with an intern who was on attachment to the organization I was working with, and he said to me, "Irungo, I'm so envious of you. I'm so in awe of you." So I was a bit kind of, my ego was inflated. I thought, wow, this is really exciting, So I said, what is it exactly that you find, attractive? And he says, your children are in good schools, that you drive a great car. I think you probably own your own house by now. And I left completely disappointed and, emotionally distraught, if I can put it that way. Why? Because really the only thing that this person could see was the material gains, right? And it has never really been a focus for me. Those things have come in the context of a 20-year career. Of course, he's at the beginning of his career. But the thing that I would have preferred him to be left with is a sense of purpose, a sense of public interest, a commitment to this country, and also a degree of humility. And I think this is where I would say on national television that many of us in the sector, like those of us in government, like those of us in the private sector, actually have been flaunting an extravagant lifestyle that is actually inconsistent with the nature of the country that we live in. And therefore we need to take responsibility for what people hear of us and how they listen to us when we speak. And I think the challenge, to all of us is really to ensure that those people out there are really holding us accountable, those of us who act in the public interest, to have a degree of humility and service that is enshrined again, and I'll mention it, chapter 6 of the Constitution, which is the humility, or as the Rotarians would say, the ability to serve greater than self.
Right. And so that's a good point for us to take a break, Waweru. This is Cheche. We're live on Citizen TV. We'll be right back.